Easy Explain Creative Evolution by Henri Bergson, Chapter 4, Real Becoming, Part 1, Form and Void. So let's kick off the big finale here, starting to work through the first part of the final chapter in this work. So first, let's circle back to an original concept by Bergson. Let's look at the void. So here, Bergson says that the representation of the void is always a representation which is full and which resolves itself on analysis into two positive elements: the idea, distinct or confused, of a substitution, and the feeling, experienced or imagined, of a desire or a regret. So this is going to set the groundwork here for how we're going to round things out, especially as we start to consider demonstrations, meaning how Bergson is going to start to compare his philosophical, pragmatic, metaphysical system to some of the more traditional and classical philosophers. So let's keep going with this. Let's keep hashing out what the antithesis is here, right? So let's look at the surprising complexity of non-existence. So here Bergson says that there is more and not less in the idea of an object conceived as non-existing, right? So let's put the idea of the void on top of this as well. Then in the idea of the same object conceived as existing. So how so? Bergson goes on to say that the idea of the object not existing is necessarily the idea of the object existing with, in addition, the representation of an exclusion of this object by the actual reality taken in block. So for something to be identified as not existing, you need the idea of it existing and not existing. It's actually more complex. There's actually more here in the void than in reality, right? So let's look at life in the void. Bergson then says that our life is thus spent in filling voids, which our intellect conceives under the influence, by no means intellectual, of desire and of regret, right, these characteristics of the void, under the pressure of vital necessities. And if we mean by void an absence of utility and not of things, we may say in this quite relative sense that we are constantly going from the void to the full. Such is the direction which our action takes. Such is the direction of creative evolution, right? Using your intelligence as an aspect of your consciousness, part of the elan vital, part of the life force, to be practical, to utilize tools, to create something from out of nothing, from out of the void. That is creative action. But let's not disregard, right, that nothing here is the starting point. It is factual reality. Reality does fill a void for Bergson. Nothing, conceived as an absence of everything, pre-exists before all things in right, if not in fact. This is like that argument by Vsauce on YouTube, if you've heard of Vsauce, of the speed of darkness, right? That darkness is actually faster than light. The absence of something is actually potentially has, higher values than the existence of something in reality. So let's look at the duration of reality then, right? So a self-sufficient reality is not necessarily a reality foreign to duration. The absolute, the whole, is revealed very near to us, and in a certain measure, in us. It is of psychological and not of mathematical nor logical essence. It lives with us. Like us, but in certain aspects, infinitely more concentrated and more gathered up in itself, it endures, right? Life itself endures, reality endures. It has to, as much to the degree that it needs to make sense, right? That's the power of the intelligence, that reality is ordered to the degree that it has to be. That connects to the absolute, that connects to the whole here of just everything, right? This concept of everything. That's how reality endures through that. Quick bit on form and becoming here for Bergson. I think this good little quote. He says, what is real is the continual change of form. Form is only a snapshot view of a transition, right? Again, essentially Nietzschean there, going back to the idea of eternal recurrence. And here's a big passage I'm going to break up into a couple parts to round out the first part of the final chapter. Looking at how knowledge is cinematographical, like it's like a movie, right? It's really how we know things. That's why we love movies as an art form. So here Bergson says that instead of attaching ourselves to the inner becoming of things, we place ourselves outside them in order to recompose their becoming artificially. We take snapshots, as it were, of the passing reality, and as these are characteristic of the reality, we have only to string them on a becoming, abstract, uniform, and invisible, situated at the back of the apparatus of knowledge, in order to imitate what there is that is characteristic in this becoming itself. So pause there, halfway through this passage. Becoming itself, right? Kind of hard for our intelligence to grasp and make sense of. So we take snapshots and we string them back together. Think of this like a movie, right? It's how we build our knowledge. It's very movie-like. He goes on to say that perception, intellection, language so proceed in general, whether we would think becoming or express it or even perceive it. We hardly do anything else than set going a kind of cinematograph inside us. The mechanism of our ordinary knowledge is of a cinematographical kind. The cinematographical character of our knowledge of things is due to the kaleidoscopic character of our adaptation to them. We're starting to get a little poetic and artistic there at the end, but I think it does a pretty good job of kind of summing up how our knowledge and our knowledge construction, our perception of our knowledge, our intelligence, our language, it's like a movie, right? We're taking snapshots, we're stringing them together, we're making sense of this kaleidoscope of life. That's how we come to know things. So kicking off the first part of chapter 4 for now. Hope this helps.